I'm Virginia Eskin, and this is A Note to You. We classical musicians have a lot of secrets, and one of them is that we just love music like this. So what makes this music so delicious? We're going to check into it today. We'll visit with Peter Bullis, the banjo player, and Stan Vincent, the trombone player with the Black Eagle Jazz Band. They're experts on traditional jazz, sometimes called Dixieland, but it's still a note to you. As a pianist, I spend my life analyzing Bach and Mozart. Well, I love doing that, but occasionally I need to learn from masters of a different style, like jazz or Dixieland. They're made up of the same musical elements. So today on A Note to You, I thought we'd try to shed a little light on the similarities and have a little fun while we're doing it. Peter Bullis and Stan Vincent join me. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Virginia.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Let's give our listeners a kind of a little introduction to jazz.
I think jazz in the beginning was a type of folk music.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did it happen in New Orleans, I think it happened in a lot of other southern cities and towns. I think New Orleans sort of became the melting pot of it all, where it did develop, taking influences from folk music, from the blues, from marches, and supposedly they say instruments that were discarded after the Civil War were picked up by a lot of the itinerant musicians, mainly black musicians at that time.
Right.
What happened to it after the 20s and after traditional jazz era sort of ended and we started getting the big bands and bop and other things, I don't think we necessarily should get into it today here, but let's try to stick up to the traditional part and up into the 20s with the classic jazz era as we know it.
Absolutely. Well, let's listen to Sweet Fields, because we both agree that that has spiritual qualities to it.
Sweet Fields, to the best of my knowledge, is a spiritual. It's a very simple tune. It's a two-chord tune.
The only way you can survive is on the rhythmic quality of this tune. And it, in my mind, really has a tremendous amount of spirit and energy, as you may hear.
Let's hear it. We've just listened to Sweet Fields as played by the Black Eagle Jazz Band. And I have in the studio here with me two live musicians, Stan Vincent and Peter Bullis. Let's go now to Perdido Street Blues. And Peter, we were just agreeing that this has a very different sound. And you said it's based on the chord construction
of a 12-bar blues. And for me, it's the form, it's the 12-bar form. It's not necessarily the tempo that it's played at, because the 12-bar form does show up at faster tempos in many tunes that we play. And it also can be regarded as a vocal thing where you're basically stating making a statement, repeating that statement, and then resolving that statement.
It begins to sound like classical ternary form. It starts off with one key, D minor, dramatic device, and then,
yep,
which is the B section, and then it goes back.
Then you'll see a C section that's basically a 12-bar blues that has a couple of other chords added into it.
Does it go back to D minor?
No, it does not.
C section in what key?
In F, still in F.
Okay.
And then you'll hear some other chords added, and you'll hear a little reprise of the D minor thing at the very end.
Goes back to the sort of dark minor key.
I believe so.
Yeah. That was Perdido Street Blues, as played by the Black Eagle Jazz Band. Next, we're going to listen to a rag, because on our musical journey, we've agreed that jazz starts with juba, spirituals, blues start to be introduced, and certainly the next link on the chain has to be ragtime, which is happening around the late 90s, turn of the century.
Many of the ragtime arrangements for the composers came to New Orleans and were read by the early jazz bands as rag pieces. I think what happened to them as the music progressed, if you will, is that the music was thrown away, and sometimes more of the jazz quality and the swing was added to the basic composition. The one that we were talking about here is a rag by a woman out of the Midwest by the name of May Aufderheide, who I know you play the rag. Interesting to me, when I saw the sheet music you had that it was just called Dusty, we always called it Dusty Rag. And what we thought we'd do is let you play a bit of it, and then we'd play a bit of it on a tape that I have from a recording session we had in England just last month.
Beautiful. The piano version goes... Now let's listen to the Black Eagle version of it. was Aufderheide's Dusty Rag, played live by the Black Eagle Jazz Band. I think you said it was recorded in England?
In England, Upton-on-Severn.
Upton-on-Severn.
Was where we were.
Very nice. Well, can we go to another interesting example? Black Cat on a Fence.
I think the thing that happens in the version you just heard of Dusty Rag, or Dusty, is that our version was more jazz-oriented than the original music as you played it on the piano. This tune that's coming up next is a tune called Black Cat on the Fence, which I also regard as rag-like. This gets played with more rag-like feeling by us than Dusty did before. I don't know the whole background of where this song came from. We learned it from a 1940s recording that was done by Bill Russell in New Orleans on his American music label.
Because I notice it doesn't have a composer. It just says traditional.
I don't know. We don't know much more about it. But it's a tune that I've always enjoyed playing, and I've always felt it to be more related to ragtime than the blues or the spirituals and so forth and so on.
Well, because of the steady bass and the sort of unsteady accompaniment, or the melody line is ragged, syncopated. Let's hear it. We've just heard Black Cat on a Fence, played by the Black Eagle Jazz Band. Now we're going to move along with probably, if Joplin is the king of ragtime, and May Aufderheide, our dusty composer, was considered the queen, how do you guys feel about Jelly Roll Morton's imprimatur? Or is he considered... He likes to say that he invented the blues. But
I think he said he invented jazz, not necessarily the
invented
blues.
Jazz?
Was, I think, is what his card used to say that he used to pass out. Jelly, I think, was a magnificent composer, and in the tunes he recorded, certainly with his Red Hot Peppers during the mid-20s, the arrangements and the musicianship that are on those records is startling, and was really a new direction that jazz started to go in the multi-strain tunes, much like ragtime. If you listen to some of Jelly's early recordings, they are very much ragtime-oriented. The one that we've selected that the Black Eagles play is Black Bottom Stomp, which has 3 strains to it, and on his original recording, we have enlarged the tune to go a little longer than the 3 minutes, but I still think we've kept the basic Morton feel to the tune.
I have to say, as a classical pianist, Peter and Stan, I enjoy rattling through Jelly Roll Morton, and it has seemed to me that there are a lot of riffs that he's lifted right out of the writings of somebody like Chopin. In his original Jelly Roll Blues, it starts off very elegantly.
That's the blues form again that we were talking about on Perdido Street Blues.
But as a pianist, the feel of those long sort of arpeggios and the trills, the prettification harkens back to Mozart, Chopin, all the stuff that when you want to make music elaborate, in a Chopin nocturne when he goes. Don't you think Jelly Roll must have heard some classical piano somewhere in his childhood?
I'm certain that he did. There's no question in my mind. I mean, he was a school pianist. He did write music. He did read music.
And that's, of course, why we know about it, because he wrote it down. And the Library of Congress has issued that huge book.
Well, that was one of the reasons why New Orleans was such a wonderful place for creativity. They had the Spanish influence, the French influence, a lot of European influence going on, and at the same time, of course, musicians who were playing just by gut feeling. So the combination of the classical influence and the gut feeling of these guys, tremendous
coalescence of...
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All flavors. Well, let's listen to Black Bottom Stomp by Jelly Roll Morton. Jelly Roll Morton's Black Bottom Stomp. I'm Virginia Eskin, and you're listening to A Note to You, a weekly show about classical music and musicians. Branching out a little bit today into the world of traditional jazz. My guests are Peter Bullis and Stan Vincent of the Black Eagle Jazz Band here in Boston. A Note to You is made possible by the friends and alumni of Northeastern University. If you have a comment or question about the program, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at anotetoyou, all one word, at WGBH.org. Our mailing address is A Note to You, care of WGBH Radio, 125 Western Avenue, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. I love this. This is like a big chocolate sampler. Did you both, as kids, as boys growing up, did you have classical music lessons?
I took piano lessons as a kid and hated every minute of it.
That's an irony. Stan, did you play in the...
Yes, I had 3 years of piano lessons and became quite frustrated because it wasn't progressing the way I wanted. So I looked around for another instrument and was fortunate to find a trombone.
Well, and we're fortunate, too.
I was bitten later because I went to New Orleans and heard this music and wanted to be part of it. And quite logically said, how can I do this? And I said, I'll learn how to play the banjo. Nobody plays the banjo anymore.
I think it's true of all of us, musicians and non-musicians. When we hear and see bands like yours, and people say that to me when I'm up on stage playing a concerto, they say, it looks like such fun. And I say, well, it is. It's the culmination of a lot of years of practice, and it is fun to do something that's, so rich and so handsome. But when you get up on stage, it's like you go into another world. You take a trip. We're going to take quite a quantum leap now. We're going to talk about Duke Ellington. When did Black Eagle make a conscious decision to branch out?
I think we made it right at the beginning. That traditional jazz not only included Morton and Oliver and Armstrong and Sidney Bechet and the likes of the New Orleans musicians, but did include things into Duke Ellington's early days in New York, where he had basically what could be termed a traditional jazz band in its instrumentation.
What year is this we're talking about?
In the 20s, 23, maybe 24. I don't remember specifically without having...
Pretty early on, though.
Yeah, very early on.
It was a small band, 8-piece perhaps.
He played and recorded what could be regarded as traditional jazz tunes. Tiger Rag was recorded by him in very early days. But he also started writing. And some of the things that he did were really, I think, put a new light on what the music could be.
At what stage was Ellington's career when Jazz Lips was composed?
I believe it was in the late 20s when it was composed. Again, this is a tune that has 2 strains. One of them is a 12-bar blues string, as you'll hear. The other one's I believe, a 16-bar string. And it's a neat little tune that we've taken and again enlarged upon past the 3-minute thing. And it's a tune that I think typifies what we've done. If you go back and listen to the Ellington original, you know where the tune came from, but we are not copying it. We are not just purveying and repeating what he's done. We put our own twist to it.
We've just heard Jazz Lips, played by the Black Eagle Jazz Band. Well, tell me how the two connect, Peter.
Well, Jazz Lips, and as everybody knows, Ellington went on to become a bigger band, and it kept getting bigger and bigger from the late 20s into the 40s, 50s, 60s. This next...
When you say bigger, you mean adding on more musicians?
Adding more musicians, yes.
2 trombones, 4 trombones.
That's correct.
A lot of sax. Mm-hmm.
Saxophone section. This next tune was by a band named the Louis Russell Orchestra. Louis Russell was a piano player originally from Panama, came to New Orleans, eventually worked his way to New York. He had a lot of New Orleans musicians playing in his band. It was a terrific big band for that time, 12, 13 pieces. It eventually became the backing band for Louis Armstrong in the 30s. This tune that we're going to play is a tune that we have been able to take from the larger format and put into our 7-piece format that, again, is a terrific tune. It could be termed a stomping type tune, much as Black Bottom Stomp was.
To me, a stomp is something that you could dance to, whereas a rag is hard to dance to, and a march you march to.
A stomp is certainly one that you can, even if you're not dancing, you can sit there and
tap your
stomp
toes.
your foot to.
Let's hear Jersey Lightning. Black Eagle Jazz Band with Jersey Lightning was recorded live at the Mount Gretna Playhouse in Pennsylvania. Tony Pringle was playing cornet, Billy Novick clarinet, Stan Vincent trombone, Bob Pillsbury on piano, Eli Neuberger tuba, Pam Pamagier drums, and Peter Bullis was the banjo player. On a note to you, today we're taking an excursion from our usual classical music into the world of jazz, thinking about some of the similarities between the two. I'm speaking here with a couple of members from the Black Eagle Jazz Band, Peter Bullis and Stan Vincent. You rarely step on each other's toes. I've heard, in hundreds of hours of listening, because I grew up the child. My father was a Dixieland musician, and there's an intuition.
Yes, that's true, and I think that it goes back to the question of listening. And anticipation, of course, plays a big part, too. And having had the great good fortune of playing with Tony Pringle, our musical leader, for 27 years, I can anticipate certain phrasing and so forth. But it's the listening that counts here, anticipating what he's going to do, anticipating what the reed player is going to do, and not stepping on those guys' toes. And I find that a good musical group, whether it be traditional in nature or whether it be a chamber music group, is a listening group. I think that can be said about our band.
Music as civilizing metaphor.
There you go.
Well, now we're going to hear something composed by one of the members of the band, the cornet player, Tony Pringle. And Leaning on the Gate, was that Leaning on His Gate?
This is a tune that Tony wrote. Tony's written several tunes for the band, as have Billy Novick, as have Bob Pillsbury. I think this is also part of the tradition that we're carrying on, where bands do write their own tunes and own material. This tune in particular, I think, is a very lovely, slow tune, the words to which have to do with Tony's grandfather going out in the evening after supper and leaning on the gate, watching the rest of the world go by.
Yes, every evening before it gets too late, round about 7 or 8, I'll step outside and there I'll wait, just standing there, and I'm leaning on that gate here. There's no particular vigil that I'm keeping here. No strange thoughts to my mind come a-leaping. Though I may dream, yes, think on fate, just stand there, lean on my gate, yes. I see the trees, yeah, I see people, yes, clouds passing through that sky. Sometimes I watch the birds fly from yonder steeple, and And sometimes I wonder why it is. Then it seems that before too very long years, that nightingale has started his sweet song. Although I leave, yes, it's never too late. Standing, dreaming, yes, just leaning on that gate. It sounds so late.
We've just heard Leaning on the Gate, played by Tony Pringle and the Black Eagle Jazz Band players. And I think we're going to end up the program today. Sad to say, I've had such a pleasure getting to know a little bit about the rules of the road with Stan Vincent, the trombone player, and Peter Bullis. So what do you have to say about High Society?
High Society is a tune from New Orleans. You could say it shows the march influence. It has a solo in it written by Alphonse P. Coup, who was a clarinet player in New Orleans that became the test piece for all New Orleans clarinetists. It's on the last strain, the trio strain.
Test piece, you mean like an audition piece?
Like an audition piece. That's exactly right.
If you could play that, you could...
You could cut most anything.
Well, we're going to have to say goodbye. And as we go out, we're hearing High Society, played by Black Eagle Jazz Band. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome, Virginia. Nice to be here.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting us.
Come again. And that wraps up our look at traditional jazz on A Note to You. Next week, we'll be back into our usual classical frame of mind. The program is made possible by the friends and alumni of Northeastern University. Our engineers today were Jim Donahue and Alan Mattis. Our producer is Alan McClellan, and I'm Virginia Eskin. A Note to You is produced by Northeastern University in cooperation with WGBH Radio, Boston.